Halloween 2023 will always stay with me, and is one of the scariest times of my life, with an encounter I had that still freaks me out today. I had been working a lot through the month of October, and as it neared Halloween, I had planned to go to a Halloween party that coming weekend. With a group of friends, they were already ahead of me when it came to prepping their costumes. As mentioned, I had been working a lot of overtime for the extra money. So with it getting closer to the date, and the party being the following night, I found myself still missing a few things I needed for my costume, mainly a mask. I finished work early that evening and knew I had to find myself a few last-minute ideas and accessories. So, taking a detour on the way home, I stopped off in town to visit one of the many Halloween pop-up shops that would open up annually every year. Parking up close to the store, I got out the car and headed over to the store. As I entered, the store was quiet. Most people, unlike me, were probably well prepared for Halloween. Looking around at the sections and aisles, I found the one I needed, where the majority of the masks were. As I browsed through the vast selection of masks, I couldn't decide which one I liked most. Did I go for a creature-style mask, or a demon-style, or more of a traditional horror movie character mask? They had it all to choose from. But what would go with my outfit? As I continued the tough process of deciding which one to get, I saw something that drew my attention out the corner of my eye. Turning to look up the top end of the aisle, someone was standing at the end of the aisle, wearing a red devil's mask. Smiling at the person, I expected them to continue on their way or take off the mask, but they just stood there and continued to look down at me. Turning to look around to see if they were staring at anyone else behind me, it was then I noticed I was the only person in that aisle. Looking back around, the person was still there watching me. Feeling it was some kind of joke, I shouted, "Cool mask!" There was no response. The person just stood there, facing me. Starting to feel a little uncomfortable and over the old scare prank, I turned, finally choosing a mask, wanting to get out of here. As I looked back over my shoulder, the person had finally gone. With my choice of mask in hand, I began to make my way to the checkout. As I was paying for my items, I looked to the side when I saw outside the window of the store the person in the red devil's mask standing outside, staring at me. I remember thinking, what the fuck? I ended up turning to the cashier and asking if they saw who that person was when they came in. He told me he didn't know, and the person came in wearing the mask shortly after I had entered. Looking back to the window, the face had now again. They had disappeared from sight. Thinking finally they had gone, I paid up and left the store and headed back to my car. As I did, I couldn't help but look around, as I looked out for that red mask. But it was nowhere in sight. Just random people walking by. Jumping in my car, I headed home for the night, excited for the Halloween party I had to look forward to the following night. After I'd arrived home later that evening, I paired my mask with my costume, making sure it worked and went well together, and happy with the final outcome. I felt I was finally ready for Halloween. I knew my friends had been ready for weeks, but with me working a lot of overtime, I just hadn't had the time to plan like they did. Putting my costume aside, and with my parents out for the night and my brother at his girlfriend's, I made a quick meal before getting myself ready for an early night. I had just finished cleaning and had made my way to the upstairs when the doorbell went. I stopped as I looked at my phone at the time. I wasn't expecting anyone, and with everyone else out for the night, I knew they weren't coming back. Plus, if they did, they'd have a key. So, making my way downstairs, I looked out the side of the door, looking to see who it was. Looking out into the night out front, I couldn't see anybody. There was no one at the door. Opening it up, I stepped outside, looking around to see if I could see anyone, but nothing. Strange, I thought, and in all honesty a little freaked out. I decided not to waste any more time and headed back inside, locking the door, making my way back upstairs as I headed to bed for the night. As I tried to settle in, it was still playing on my mind who rang the bell. Eventually convincing myself it was nothing, or maybe even just a harmless prank, I sat scrolling through my phone for a while before laying my head down to get some sleep, as I was now just fighting to stay awake for no reason. It wasn't long before I began to drift off, and just as I was falling, I was brought back to my senses by the sound of something smashing downstairs. Startled, I shot up shocked as I looked over to my door, listening to see if I could hear anything else. But all I could hear now was silence. What the hell was that, I thought. Grabbing my phone, I walked over to my door, peering into the hallway. Being home alone and hearing a noise like that is never something you want. And I can't tell you how much it scares the crap out of you. I knew I had to investigate though. I had to know what it was, or if there was an intruder. Slowly walking into the hallway, I peered down the stairs. I couldn't see anything. As I made my way to the kitchen, it was then I saw what the noise was. A glass had fell off the drainer and smashed on the floor. I felt the relief wash over me, knowing that's all it was. I had obviously overstacked the drainer, and the glass had fallen off. Cleaning up the mess, I double-checked the doors for peace of mind and then headed back to bed. After I got back in, it felt like it took me forever to fall to sleep after that, but at some point I eventually drifted off, as it wasn't until the next morning I woke up. As I got myself out of bed and freshened up, I headed downstairs, and it was that moment that will always haunt me. As I walked into the kitchen, I froze. I felt the blood in my veins run cold, as what lay on top of my kitchen worktop was the red devil mask of the person from the Halloween shop. My heart racing, I looked around the room to see no one. Walking over to the mask, I then saw what lay in front of it. As I reached out my shaking hand to inspect it, I felt physically sick. What I was looking at was a set of Polaroid pictures of me, sleeping. Whoever this was had been in my room as I slept. Not only in my house, but in my room, watching me at my most vulnerable. I couldn't help but cry as I called the police, fearing I was being watched. When the police arrived, I told them about the person in the mask at the store, the fact they must have followed me home. I still don't know how they got in the house, but with the evidence and my statement, it was in the police's hands to investigate. I didn't feel safe alone. My parents came back as quick as they could to comfort me. The following days were horrible. Nothing much came back. They had checked the CCTV from the store, but the person had arrived in that mask, so they still couldn't identify a suspect. They couldn't even pick anything up of the mask itself, stating maybe they had a replica to leave behind and it wasn't the actual one they were wearing. Eventually, everything went cold. The police never managed to find out who it was that night that stalked me. I don't know why that person chose me that night, and I never will know why. It still scares me to this day, and sadly, will always taint Halloween for me.
Halloween was a time of year I looked forward to. Where I'm from, it isn't celebrated as much as it is in other parts of the world. But being a fan of horror and the spooky season, I enjoyed it, and I still do in some ways. Just not as much as I used to, because of what happened to me a few years back on Halloween, 2019. What happened still freaks me out today. I'm from a quiet town, and although we didn't usually get many trick-or-treaters in the area, I was always prepared and brought candy and chocolates for the odd few that we did get that knocked the door. I like to acknowledge the people that did make the effort to celebrate the occasion and dress up in cool costumes for the night, as it used to be one of my favorite holidays throughout the year. So, a few nights before, I stocked up and got supplies to leave in a bowl, ready for the night. It was soon Halloween, and that night, as I had no plans on going out myself, I decided to chill out, get a few beers in, and watch a few of my favorite horror movies back to back. I remember being halfway through Hellraiser when the doorbell rang. It was 9 p.m., and it was the first set of trick-or-treaters I'd got that night. I made my way to the door and grabbed the bowl of candy. As I opened the door, I was greeted by a mini Michael Myers and an awesome-looking scarecrow. I complimented their costumes and gave them both some candy and waved them goodbye as they made their way back down the drive and through the gates. I was soon back to the film, enjoying it as I hadn't seen it in so long. After that had finished, I decided to put on a more modern horror with the first Conjuring. It was nearing 11 p.m. When I was settled watching the film, and pretty certain I wouldn't be getting any more trick-or-treaters at that time of night, I paused the film, headed to grab myself another drink and lock up. But as I was in the kitchen, 3 loud knocks echoed down the hallway from the front door. I looked at the time and thought surely it couldn't be more trick-or-treaters. As I made my way to the door, I bypassed the bowl of candy, straight to the door. As I opened it, I was met with a tall, hooded figure standing in my doorway, wearing a white, faceless mask. Just 2 dark, sunken holes where their eyes sat. I stood there for a second in silence, thinking to myself, this didn't even look like a kid. Maybe a late teen under the mask at a push, but this person was definitely no kid. The silence was soon broken as a deep, quiet voice came from behind the mask as they slowly said, "Trick or treat," in an emotionless way. Still processing the person that stood at my door, I soon tried to lighten the mood as I said, "A little late for trick-or-treating, aren't you?" Throwing in a few laughs, trying to lighten the moment as I reached for the bowl of candy. As I turned back, I held out the bowl, offering the guy some candy. But instead of taking some candy, the guy just stood there, motionless, staring at me. I began to feel slightly uneasy as I said, "Here, take some candy and leave." Again, the guy just stood there, staring at me, for what felt like forever. I just about had enough, and not to mention freaked by this stranger, I pulled the bowl back as I said, "Okay, the prank's over now. You can leave or I'll call the police." This didn't seem to faze them at all, as the guy again continued to stare at me. As I was about to shout, the guy slowly turned around and walked back off down the drive into the night. Freaked by the whole encounter, I shut the door, locking it behind me, looking outside one more time, making sure they were actually gone. I headed back to the kitchen to grab my drink and finish watching the movie. Albeit slightly more creeped out now watching a horror movie and being alone. An hour later, the movie was nearing the end. I felt myself drifting in and out of sleep, trying to stay awake and watch it. As I was about to give in and sleep, I was soon awake, shooting up to the sound of 3 loud knocks banging on the front door. Startled, my heart now racing, I sat up staring at the front door. It was now midnight and I knew this was no trick-or-treater. I raced over to the door and looked through the peephole. There was no one in sight. I opened the door slowly to get a better view. There was no one there, and the drive was empty. But my gut knew and was telling me it was the same guy from an hour prior. I slammed the door shut, locking it again. Freaked out, I made sure all the windows were shut and turned off the TV, getting ready to head upstairs. I grabbed my phone and headed to my room, having had enough of Halloween and horrors for one night. I looked out my bedroom window to get a better view and see if I could see anything outside, but no one was there. I thought maybe whoever that was had finally had enough of pranking me and ran off. I locked my bedroom door and lay on my bed, playing on my phone for a bit as I was too freaked out to sleep. After browsing Instagram for a while, I began to drift off, and before I knew it, I must have been asleep as what happened next scared the shit out of me. The sound of glass shattering crashed through the house, waking me instantly as adrenaline surged through my body. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find as being a weapon, which ended up being a dumbbell. I stood behind my bedroom door, trying to listen out for any noise or signs of movement downstairs, but there was just silence. I slowly opened my bedroom door and instantly felt the cold air hit me. Heart pumping, I walked to the top of the stairs, looking down, listening for any sign of movement. Slowly making my way down the stairs, I didn't know if I was brave or stupid, but I had to know what had smashed. I reached the bottom, and the house seemed empty. As I turned the corner, I saw the shattered glass of my kitchen back door, which sent shivers down my spine. A brick lay on the floor as I slowly moved in closer. It wasn't until I reached the kitchen door that I could then hear the sound of static coming from my front room. as the door was right next to the kitchen entrance. I slowly pushed open the door to the front room. As it opened, the sound of static grew as the light from my TV lit up the room. It was then when I saw it. I froze to the spot. Lying on my coffee table in front of the TV was the faceless mask. Those dark, sunken black eye holes staring back at me. My heart raced as I looked around the room, as I clenched the weight in my hand. The room was empty. Moving closer to the mask, I could see a piece of paper next to the mask, and upon closer inspection, it read, "Trick or treat." Fear surging through my body, I made a run to my front door, bursting out onto my drive as I called the police, turning back and looking into my house, fearing someone would follow me. But no one did. I explained everything to the police, not knowing and fearing that whoever it was still in my house. The operator told me to stay on the line and that officers would be with me shortly. I walked and stood out on my quiet street that night, too afraid to stand at my house. The police arrived pretty soon after I'd called them, and with me in tow, they searched my house, finding no one. Upon leaving, they took the brick, the mask, and the note, hoping to gain some evidence as to who it was that broke into my house. I didn't sleep at all that night, and to be honest, many nights after. Nothing ever came back from the police. They were never able to apprehend a suspect. I don't have any idea who it was that came to my door that night behind that mask, but whoever it was played one fucked up Halloween prank on me, if that's what it was. Ever since then, I've never stayed alone on Halloween. You get some freaks out there on Halloween, but the fear of not knowing who it was being the worst. I hope I never come across them again.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this terrifying video. We hope you're enjoying the spooky season and these Halloween-related encounters. Just want to say a massive thank you to the amazing Danny Dreadful for helping us out and bringing her amazing voice to the channel. And if you're enjoying the content, please drop a like and share the video, as it really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe for more horror content coming your way. Most of you viewing are not yet subscribed, so why not join us and become a part of the Horror Motives community, where fear lies within. Happy Halloween, and see you soon for the next video.